The air on the Isle of Skye tasted different. It was the first thought that entered Elara Vance's mind as she stepped out of the rattling taxi and into the damp, peat-scented embrace of the evening. It was cold, sharp, and carried the wild, briny tang of the North Atlantic, a stark contrast to the warm, garlic and oil-infused air of her tiny Brooklyn kitchen. She pulled her cashmere wrap tighter, a futile gesture against the pervasive chill that seemed to seep from the very ground. Before her, the Eilean Donn Retreat stood as a monument to stark, Scottish grandeur. It wasn't a castle in the fairy-tale sense, but a formidable, grey stone manor house, its crenellations biting into a sky the color of bruised lavender. Lights glowed warmly from its leaded windows, a promise of shelter against the vast, untamed landscape that swept down to a churning, steel-grey sea. "This is it, Elara," she whispered to herself, her breath pluming in the air. "The pinnacle." Her food blog, The Urban Palate, had started as a hobby, a creative escape from a soul-crushing marketing job. 5 years and a viral saffron-infused paella recipe later, it was her livelihood, her identity. An invitation to Chef Rona MacLeod's exclusive, week-long culinary retreat was the ultimate validation. MacLeod was a legend, a temperamental artist whose Michelin stars shone as brightly as his infamous scowl. This retreat, shrouded in secrecy and hosted only once a year, was the stuff of foodie folklore. The heavy oak door swung open before she could lift the wrought iron knocker, revealing a woman with a posture so rigid it could have been carved from the same stone as the house. She was dressed in a severe black dress, her silver hair pulled into a tight chignon. "Ms. Vance, we've been expecting you. I am Mrs. Campbell, the house manager." Her voice was as crisp and cold as the Scottish air. "The other guests have already arrived. You are the last." Elara offered an apologetic smile. "The flight from New York, then the drive from Inverness." Mrs. Campbell's expression did not thaw. "Indeed. Your luggage will be taken to your room. The welcome reception is commencing in the main drawing room. Chef MacLeod does not tolerate tardiness." She was ushered inside into a cavernous great hall. A massive fireplace, large enough to park a small car in, roared with a blaze of peat and logs, the heat a physical shock after the cold outside. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries and the mounted heads of stags, their glassy eyes seeming to follow her. The air was a complex bouquet of wood smoke, old money, and something else, something deliciously savory and herbaceous emanating from the depths of the house. The other guests were clustered around the fire, glasses of wine in hand. Elara quickly catalogued them with a blogger's keen eye. There was Fiona and Julian Croft, a sleek, wealthy-looking couple from London. Julian's watch probably cost more than her car. There was Pavel, a hulking, silent Eastern European man with hands like meat cleavers, who was introduced as Chef MacLeod's personal butcher and procurer of rare meats. And then there was Liam. He stood slightly apart from the group, near a side table laden with bottles, holding a single glass of deep ruby-red wine. He was tall, with the kind of lean, wiry build that spoke of physical work rather than a gym. His dark hair was a little too long, falling over eyes the color of a stormy sea. He wasn't conventionally handsome. His face was too angular, his jaw too set. But there was an intensity to his stillness that was magnetic. He was, she guessed, the sommelier. "Ah, the American blogger," a booming voice echoed through the hall. Ronan MacLeod emerged from a shadowy corridor, a presence as large as his reputation. He was a bear of a man, with a fiery red beard streaked with white and a barrel chest. He wore a pristine white chef's jacket, unbuttoned at the neck, revealing a glimpse of red hair. His eyes, a piercing blue, scanned the room, missing nothing. "We can finally begin. I trust your journey was adequate." His gaze swept over them all, a king surveying his subjects. "Welcome to Eilean Donn. For the next week, you will eat, sleep, and breathe cuisine. You will witness perfection. You will taste genius. And you will not complain." A smile, more of a baring of teeth, followed. "This is not a holiday. It is a pilgrimage." He gestured to the man by the wine table. "This is Liam Byrne, my sommelier. He is an artist with a bottle, a surly bastard, but his palate is unmatched. Listen to him. The wine is as important as the food." Liam gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, his stormy eyes meeting Elara's for a fleeting second. A jolt, unexpected and unwelcome, passed through her. It was a look of pure, undiluted cynicism. The first dinner was a revelation. It was a symphony of textures and flavors that told a story of the Scottish landscape. Velvety smoked salmon with foraged sea vegetables, a consommé so clear and profound it tasted like liquid peat in Skye, and a main course of Highland venison, so tender it yielded to the fork without pressure, paired with a glacé of wild berries that was both sweet and startlingly tart. With each course, Liam presented the wine. His descriptions were sparse, devoid of the flowery language Elara was used to from sommeliers in New York. "A Chassagne Montrachet," he said, pouring the white wine. "Brioche, a hint of hazelnut. It will complement the fat in the salmon without overpowering the smoke." For the venison, he poured a Burgundy. Gevrey Chambertin, 2015. Earth, dark fruit, a touch of game. It speaks the same language as the meat. His voice was a low baritone, laced with a subtle Irish lilt. When his fingers brushed against hers as he handed her a glass, his skin was cool. She found herself watching him more than the legendary chef MacLeod. There was a story there, a shadow behind those stormy eyes. Later, as the group retired, sated and slightly drunk on excellence and expensive wine, Elara found herself on the grand staircase at the same time as Liam. "The wine was incredible," she said, the words feeling inadequate. He paused, a step above her, looking down. "It's my job. It's more than a job. The way you described the Gevrey Chambertin, it speaks the same language. That's poetry." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "It's the truth. Food and wine are a conversation. Most people are just too loud to hear it." He held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the ancient runner. Back in her room, a chamber of stone and thick tapestries that felt 1,000 miles from Brooklyn, Elara opened her laptop. The Wi-Fi was frustratingly slow. She began to type her first blog entry. "The location is as dramatic as the cuisine. And the players. Chef MacLeod is every bit the brilliant tyrant one would expect. But it's the sommelier, Liam, who is the true enigma. He moves through this temple of food like a silent, brooding ghost, his knowledge profound but his manner forbidding. There's an attraction there, I can't deny it, the kind that feels as dangerous as it is compelling. Like a fine, old Burgundy, he promises complexity and a potentially devastating finish." She deleted the last sentence. It was too personal, too unprofessional. But she couldn't delete the feeling. As she fell asleep to the sound of the wind howling around the stone walls, her last thought was of stormy gray eyes. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of culinary immersion. MacLeod was a demanding, often cruel, but undeniably brilliant teacher. He demonstrated the precise way to deboine a grouse, the secret to a flawless hollandaise, and the art of balancing acidity in a dessert. Elara took notes furiously, her fingers stained with berry juice and her mind expanding. Liam was a constant, quiet presence. During the wine pairing sessions, he was terse but illuminating. He once corrected MacLeod on the vintage of a Bordeaux, a moment of such breathtaking audacity that the room fell silent. MacLeod had glared, but then a slow, grudging smile had spread across his face. "Aye, you're right, Byrne. The 09, not the 10. The tannins are softer. You have the devil's own palate." Elara found herself seeking out Liam's quiet company. During a break, she found him in the walled garden, staring out at the stormy sea. "It's breathtaking," she said, coming to stand beside him. "It's isolated," he replied, not looking at her. "You don't enjoy it here? It's a job." He finally turned to her. "Why are you so interested, blogger? Looking for a story? Maybe I'm just interested in you." His gaze was intense, searching. "That's a dangerous pastime." "Why? What are you hiding?" A flicker of something, pain, anger, crossed his face. "We all have our secrets. Even Chef MacLeod." Before she could ask what he meant, a shout came from the house. It was time for the next session. The tension in the house was palpable. MacLeod's temper was shorter than usual. He snapped at Julian Croft for clumsily handling a knife and reduced Fiona to tears over her poorly emulsified sauce. Elara saw him having a heated, whispered argument with Mrs. Campbell in the hallway, the house manager's face a mask of stoic displeasure. That night, after a particularly tense dinner where MacLeod had sent back 3 bottles of wine Liam had chosen, declaring them swill, Elara couldn't sleep. The wind had died down, and an eerie silence had fallen over the island. Slipping out of her room, she decided to go to the library she'd spotted earlier, hoping to find a book to distract her. As she passed the entrance to the wine cellar, a heavy, iron-bound door at the end of a stone corridor, she heard voices. Hushed but angry. She recognized them immediately. MacLeod and Liam. Pushing too far, Ronan. This isn't a game anymore. Liam's voice was low, strained. You knew the terms, Byrne. MacLeod's tone was a sneer. You don't get to back out now. That shipment is coming, and you will be there. Or have you forgotten what's at stake? I've forgotten nothing. But this is different. Involving the guests. They are camouflage. Necessary expenses. Now, do your job, or I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I'll ruin you. Elara's blood ran cold. She took a step back, her heart hammering against her ribs. The floorboard beneath her creaked, a sound like a gunshot in the silent corridor. The voices inside ceased abruptly. She turned and fled, back to her room, her mind racing. Shipment. Camouflage. Ruin him. What had she stumbled into? The scream tore through the manor at just past 7 the next morning. It was high, piercing, and filled with a terror so raw it bypassed the brain and went straight to the primal fear in the spine. Elara, already awake and dressed, was the first out of her room. She followed the sound to the kitchen. Mrs. Campbell was standing in the doorway, her hand clamped over her mouth, her face as white as the apron she wore. Inside, the scene was one of grotesque contradiction. The kitchen was pristine, gleaming in the weak morning light filtering through the high windows. Copper pots hung in perfect order. But in the center of the vast, stainless steel island lay the body of Ronan MacLeod. He was still in his chef's whites. The hilt of his own prized, Japanese-made chef's knife protruded from his chest. The blood, a shocking vibrant red, had pooled on the steel surface and dripped onto the slate floor. Elara stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. The world seemed to slow down, the details searing themselves into her memory. The smell of bleach and blood, the perfect, untouched state of the kitchen, the absolute stillness of the giant who had been so full of life and fury just hours before. The next few hours were a blur of panic and procedure. The local police from Portree, a dour inspector named Dougal and his younger sergeant, arrived, their presence making the vast manor feel claustrophobic. The guests and staff were herded into the drawing room, the mood a toxic mix of shock, fear, and suspicion. Inspector Dougal, a man with a face like a weathered cliff and eyes that missed nothing, took statements. His gaze lingered on each of them. Fiona Croft, weeping theatrically into her husband's shoulder. Julian, looking pale and irritated. Pavel, stony-faced and silent. Mrs. Campbell, rigid with a controlled horror. And Liam. He stood by the window, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But Elara saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. It was when the sergeant returned from a preliminary search, holding a small, evidence-bagged object, that the atmosphere shifted irrevocably. It was a silver taste vin, the traditional wine taster's cup, on a chain. It was engraved with a single initial, L. Liam's taste vin. Found, the sergeant reported in a hushed tone to Dougal, tucked behind a sack of flour, a few feet from the body. Wiped clean of prints, but damning nonetheless. Mr. Byrne, Inspector Dougal's voice was calm, deadly. Would you care to explain how your property came to be at my crime scene? Liam's stormy eyes met Elara's for a split second. In them, she saw not guilt, but a desperate, resigned fury. I have no idea, he said, his voice flat. It was stolen from my room 2 days ago. A hollow, pathetic excuse. Elara felt her heart sink. The evidence was circumstantial, but powerful. The whispered argument, the threat, the motive, and now this. As Dougal began to formally caution Liam, something snapped inside Elara. The blogger, the observer, receded. The sleuth, the seeker of truth, emerged. The man she was attracted to, the enigma she had been trying to solve, was being framed. She was sure of it. The crime scene was too perfect, the placement of the taste vin too convenient. While the police were occupied with Liam in another room, she made a decision. She would use her skills, her eye for detail, her ability to read people, her insatiable curiosity, to find the real killer. The Isle of Skye was now a gilded cage. The police forbade anyone from leaving, the stormy weather providing a natural barrier. The retreat had become a prison, and one of them was a murderer. Elara started with what she knew, the kitchen. Pleading a need for a cup of tea to steady her nerves, she managed to get a few minutes alone with Mrs. Campbell in the pantry, under the watchful eye of the young sergeant. "It's just so awful," Elara said, her voice trembling convincingly. "And the kitchen, it was so clean. Aside from, it's as if the killer cleaned up after themselves." Mrs. Campbell's hands trembled as she measured out tea leaves. Chef MacLeod was a fanatic for cleanliness. He would have scrubbed the entire kitchen himself after service, as he always did. The murderer must have come after. After he'd already cleaned, Elara thought. So the pristine state wasn't the killer's doing. That was important. It meant the murder was likely premeditated, happening after MacLeod's routine clean-down, not in a fit of passion during a fight. Next, she turned her attention to the other guests. She found Fiona Croft in the conservatory, pretending to admire the orchids. "It's just terrible," Fiona said, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. "We were such admirers of his work. Julian and I, we invested, in his new London venture. This is a financial disaster as well as a personal tragedy." Investors, Elara noted. Had MacLeod been about to pull out? Had the Crofts stood to lose a fortune? Julian was more blunt when she found him scowling at the bar, pouring himself a very early whiskey. The man was a genius, but a bloody nightmare. Rude. Arrogant. I had a blazing row with him yesterday over the investment terms. He was trying to change the deal at the last minute. Swore I wouldn't get a penny back. He drained his glass. Not that it matters now. A row. A financial motive. But was it strong enough for murder? Pavel, the butcher, was the most difficult to read. He was sharpening a set of personal knives in the game larder, the rhythmic shhhhk of steel on steel setting Elara's teeth on edge. "He was a hard man," Pavel said in his heavily accented, gravelly voice, not looking up from his task. "But he paid well. He knew quality." "No, I do not know. Did you argue with him?" Elara pressed gently. Pavel's hands stilled for a moment. "Everyone argued with Chef. It was the way." He resumed sharpening. "But he crossed lines. He was involved in things. Things beyond the kitchen." "What things?" But Pavel just shook his head, a wall of silence. Her most risky move was seeking out Liam. He was being held in his room, with the sergeant posted outside. She waited until the sergeant was called away for a moment and slipped in. Liam was standing by the window, his back to her. He turned, and the raw anguish in his face took her breath away. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I don't think you did it," she said simply. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "The police do. The evidence does. The evidence is a plant. Tell me about your argument with him last night." "In the cellar." His eyes widened in surprise. "You heard that? Enough. What shipment? What was he involving the guests in?" Liam ran a hand through his dark hair. He looked torn. "It's not what you think. It wasn't drugs or anything like that. It was wine. Rare, expensive vintages. But stolen. Looted from cellars in France during the war, hidden away for decades. A private collector, a very dangerous man, was selling them on the black market. Ronan was the middleman, using the retreat, the movement of guests and supplies, as a cover to get them into the country. He forced me to be involved because of my connections, my knowledge. He knew I needed the money. Desperately." "Why? What for?" His shoulders slumped. "My sister. She's sick. The treatment, it's exorbitant. Ronan knew. He offered me a way out, a huge payout for one job. This job. But last night, he told me the plan had changed. The collector was getting nervous. He wanted the entire shipment moved tonight, and he wanted to use one of the guests' luggage to do it. I refused. It was one thing for me to be involved, but to implicate an innocent person. I told him I was out. That's when he threatened to ruin me." Elara's mind was reeling. A smuggling operation. A dangerous collector. A motive for Liam, yes, but an even bigger one for the mysterious collector. If MacLeod was becoming a liability. "The taste vin," she said. "Who knew you had it? Who could have taken it?" "Everyone," Liam sighed. "I used it during the first day's tasting. It was a gift from my mentor. I always have it with me." The sergeant's footsteps echoed in the hall outside. Elara knew her time was up. "I'm going to find who did this," she whispered fiercely. As she turned to leave, his hand shot out and caught her wrist. His touch was no longer cool, but warm, almost electric. "Be careful, Elara. If they killed Ronan for crossing them, they won't hesitate to kill again." Liam's warning echoed in her mind as she pieced the puzzle together. The killer was one of them. The Crofts, with their financial motive? Pavel, the silent accomplice who knew about MacLeod's other business? Mrs. Campbell, the rigid house manager who might have had her own secrets? Or was it the shadowy collector who had somehow infiltrated the retreat? She needed to see the crime scene again. Waiting until the dead of night, when the manor was silent save for the groaning of ancient timbers, she slipped from her room and made her way to the kitchen. The police had sealed it, but the tape was poorly affixed to the large old doorframe. She ducked under it. Using the light from her phone, she scanned the room. It was exactly as she remembered, though the blood had been cleaned from the floor, leaving a faint dark stain on the slate. She went to the spot where the taste vin had been found, near the flour sacks. She looked at the sacks. One was tipped slightly, a small drift of white powder on the floor beside it. Then she saw it. Something tiny, almost invisible, glinting in the beam of her phone. Nestled against the base of the sack was a single, small, lustrous pearl. Her mind raced. Fiona Croft. She had been wearing pearl earrings every day. Elara remembered because they were so perfectly matched, so large and luminous. She had admired them at the first dinner. Her heart pounding, she hurried back to the main part of the house. She needed to check the guest register, which Mrs. Campbell kept in her office. Slipping into the dark, orderly room, she found the heavy ledger. Her fingers traced down the list of names for this week's retreat. And then she saw it. A name she hadn't paid attention to before, a name that sent a fresh chill down her spine. Not one of the guests, but listed under Provisions and Logistics, Pavel Orlov. Orlov, the name of the notorious reclusive Russian oligarch and art collector, known for his vast, acquired collection of looted art. It couldn't be a coincidence. Pavel wasn't just a butcher, he was the collector's man. The enforcer. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Pavel was the killer. MacLeod had outlived his usefulness or had become a risk. The argument with Julian Croft was a red herring. The pearls. Fiona must have been in the kitchen, perhaps sneaking a snack, and lost an earring during the struggle or when she discovered the body. She was too vain, too obsessed with her image, to admit she'd been somewhere she shouldn't have been, so she'd kept quiet. Elara had to get to Inspector Dougal. She turned to leave the office, but a massive figure filled the doorway. Pavel. In his hand, he held not a butcher's knife, but a long, thin boning knife, its point gleaming in the dim light. "You are a nosy woman, blogger," he said, his voice a low growl. "Asking too many questions." "It was you," Elara said, backing away, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. Mr. Orloff's man. MacLeod was making mistakes. Getting greedy. Or maybe he wanted to back out. He was weak. He threatened the entire operation. Talking to that sommelier, feeling guilty. Guilt is a luxury in our business. He took a step forward. "And you have become a liability." He lunged at her. Elara screamed and threw her phone at his face. It struck him on the brow, and he grunted in surprise, giving her a split second to dart past him, out into the hall. She ran, her bare feet slapping on the cold stone, her breath coming in ragged sobs. She could hear his heavy footsteps behind her. She didn't know where she was going. The manor was a maze of dark corridors. She burst into the great hall, the embers of the fire casting long, dancing shadows. Pavel was right behind her. "There is nowhere to run," he snarled. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows near the staircase. Liam. He must have heard the commotion, or perhaps he'd been unable to sleep. He saw Pavel, saw the knife, and without a moment's hesitation, he threw himself at the larger man. It was not a fight of strength, but of desperation. Liam was agile, using his knowledge of the room, ducking under Pavel's swings, tackling him around the waist and sending them both crashing into a small table, which splintered under their weight. The boning knife skittered across the floor. Elara didn't hesitate. She scrambled for it, her fingers closing around the cool hilt just as Pavel overpowered Liam, pinning him to the floor, his massive hands closing around Liam's throat. "No!" she screamed. She lunged forward, not to stab, but to threaten. But Pavel, sensing the movement, shifted, and the sharp point of the knife grazed his side. He roared in pain and anger, releasing Liam and turning his fury on her. It was all the distraction Liam needed. He drove his fist into Pavel's jaw with a sickening crack. The big man staggered back, dazed. At that moment, the lights blazed on. Inspector Dougal and his sergeant stood in the doorway, weapons drawn. "Enough!" Dougal bellowed. The fight went out of Pavel. He slumped to the floor, clutching his bleeding side, his story unraveling under the weight of the pearl, Elara's testimony, and the attempted murder the police had just witnessed. The storm finally broke as the police led a handcuffed Pavel Orlov away. The rain lashed against the windows, washing the Isle of Skye clean. In the drawing-room, wrapped in a blanket and sipping a brandy pressed into her hand by a surprisingly gentle Mrs. Campbell, Elara gave her full statement to Inspector Dougal. Liam sat beside her, a bag of ice pressed to his knuckles, a bruise already blooming on his jaw. "It seems I owe you both an apology," Dougal said, his stern features softened by a grudging respect. "Especially you, Mr. Byrne. Your taste vin was indeed a plant, as Miss Vance suspected. Mr. Orlov has confessed to the murder, and to his role in the smuggling ring. He was sent here to tie up loose ends. Chef MacLeod was the primary loose end." Later, when they were alone, Liam turned to Elara. "You were incredible, and stupid, and brave." A faint smile, the first genuine one she'd seen from him, touched his lips. "You could have been killed." "So could you," she said. "Why did you come out of your room?" "I heard a noise. But I think I felt you were in danger." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. They were warm now, and steady. "Thank you, Elara, for believing in me." The following days were a quiet anticlimax. The Crofts, shaken and embarrassed about the pearl, left as soon as they were able. The police completed their investigation. The Eilean Donn Retreat was closed, its legacy forever tarnished. On Elara's last day, as she packed her bags, there was a knock on her door. It was Liam. "I'm leaving for Dublin today," he said. "My sister. I need to be with her. The police have returned my passport." "Of course," Elara said, a hollow feeling opening in her chest. This was it. The end of the strange, intense interlude. "But," he continued, stepping closer, "I was hoping that when things settle down, I might come to New York. I hear there's a brilliant food blogger there who might need a sommelier to consult on her posts. One who understands that food and wine are a conversation." Elara's heart soared. "I think she'd like that very much." He leaned in and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss, but one filled with all the pent-up intensity, fear, and hope of the past week. It tasted of redemption, of a future, of a fine wine finally ready to be uncorked. "It's a date," he whispered against her lips. As her taxi bounced down the long drive away from Eilean Donn, Elara opened her laptop. The Wi-Fi signal was strong now. She began to type, her fingers flying across the keys. This would be her most read post ever. But it wouldn't be just about the food. It would be about the lies simmering beneath a perfect sauce, the secrets hidden in the cellars, and the unexpected, life-saving connection forged in the crucible of fear and suspicion. It would be the story of a vintage deceit, and the clarity that finally came after the storm.